Well, it's noon, everybody. Thank you, Carlos and Sarah and somebody else. And good for joining. As we've put in here that we're going to use the Monday use the Mondays in the month of December to just generally go over the main topics that we covered in 2022. And see if they're breaking it down to those topics per Monday. Today's questions can be about the offer to purchase or buyer agency, or really any other question you might have. It's just sort of a way of taking time to listen to other people's questions. It may enlighten something of your own. Most of us have now gone through continuing ed, and there was a lot of great reinforcement on the topics that Steph and I covered over the years in continuing ed. I do have to say I was impressed with the content in continuing ed this year. It went a little deeper and more, I believe it went a little deeper and more content than it's been in the past. Generally, it was more overview, but this really dug deep into some of the intricacies of those topics, depending on which ones you chose. But everybody had to see the listing one and the offer to purchase one. And the questions were silly easy, but the I really was impressed with the content that they covered this year. So we'll just start. Steph is on. Hi, Steph.
Hi, guys.
And again, we can talk about questions that you have basically on those two topics. But as I said, any other questions you can have, feel free to ask today and share with everybody else that's on the call. So somebody want to start? There's Nada. So we're starting with a good group.
Yeah, any questions, you guys?
As I said, we're zeroing in on buyer agency and offer to purchase, but any other question you may have about any of our contracts, topics?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can.
I apologize in advance if you hear banging. I'm getting carpeting in 2 bedrooms. What a chore. I have new respect for sellers and buyers who deal with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in the middle of a contract right now where I need to incorporate language for the inspection contingency for my offer to purchase that basically says if there's any repairs done as a result of the inspection contingency, that the buyer and seller have to agree on it with a licensed professional contractor. Is there something in the can on that already?
Yes. I believe so. I mean, I know a lot of agents have it already templated into their contracts that if they do serve notice of defect, that the defects are to be done, or the repairs are to be done by a licensed contractor with lien waivers and receipts.
Yeah.
That's basically the word. Steph?
No, Nada, there is built-in language around this, but that is, it's just like in the event that it gets down to a notice of defects.
Right.
So yeah, it's in the SIP forms library. And if you are familiar with the SIP forms library, which I think you are,
Yep.
it's under the right to cure is the clause.
Okay.
I pull it up. But then if you're just, again, this is only addressing the fact if it were to come down to a notice of defect situation and the seller elects to cure. If you, if you're just talking about simple amendment language, well, the solution to that is that a buyer won't sign anything that states otherwise. Like a buyer won't agree to anything other than having a licensed person make those repairs. You know what I mean? Like, though, that's still under your control when it comes down to negotiating
Right.
in the standard manner. So, but back to, I'm just gonna pull it up here.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Like in amendment territory, we're talking about it openly. And hey, we found a bunch of electrical issues. We'd like you guys to remedy that. You know, it's under the $3,000 that we said we won't ding you for, but we want it by a licensed contractor. Here's the amendment.
Right, and then you guys can control that language in the amendment negotiation process, so.
Yeah, and just to
right.
repeat, you can't put those in a notice of, you cannot put it in a notice of defect. It has to be in your offer or negotiated in an amendment.
Yep.
But your notice of defect can't say it has to be done by a licensed contractor.
It needs to say it now in the offer to purchase.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way and it worked for my advantage, but I had some stomach acid moments for that. So I'm not, you only have it once and then you learn.
That's right.
Yep.
So, yeah, so in the clause library, the category is offer to purchase. And then the clause title is right to cure. And so if you are a buyer's agent and you give the seller the right to cure in the inspection contingency, you would want to add this at the moment of writing the offer. And the clause basically says seller shall have the right to cure in a good and workmanlike manner using professional licensed experts with the benefit of permit as required and in accordance with municipal building code and generally accepted construction and safety standards. Scope of work shall be defined by an independent third-party expert, for example, an engineer, a roofing consultant, etc. So you would want to plop that language in.
Addendum A or the main offer?
I think this would fit in the additional provisions on the main offer on the last page, for sure.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Addendum A has a benefit to us that it actually has, if you want to make it a contingency as opposed to a special provision, they have the outline for creating a contingency. And that's one of the nice services of the Addendum A.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
And a special provision is this offer is good providing that this be done. And a contingency is a protection to the buyer that if it's not done, the buyer can get out of the contract if it's not performed. So a contingency says what needs to be done, what happens if it's not done, and it has to be done by this certain date. So it's more particular, but it creates a contingency that protects the buyer and gives the buyer a legitimate way out of the contract if it's not done.
Yeah, Joan's comments are not strictly related to your question on the right to cure language. It's just highlighting that aspect of the Addendum A.
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't know that actually. So that's super useful.
Good. I just read in the, I think it was WRA or GMAR newsletter that we're going to have a new Addendum A January 1st. So they've been working on this for a couple of years, I guess.
Oh,
So we'll be back to the drawing board at the beginning of the year, talking about the newly, and I think it'll have a mandatory date. I'm not sure, but sometime early in January.
cool.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions right now, guys?
That was a good question, Nada. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Who is NJ?
NJ, reveal yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, it's Noah Fubelier on the FRG
Oh,
team.
good.
Hi,
Hi.
Joan. How are you?
Good things. Good. And I don't know who iPhone is either.
I'll
That's
throw out
me,
another
Emily
question.
Gilder.
Oh,
It's
I
sorry,
have
go
a
me.
ahead.
question too.
Oh, it's Emily Gilders. I'm with Champagne Realty Group.
Oh, sure, good. Good, and I said, these open questions are good for all of us because we get to hear what somebody else is questioning, and most likely it's a good information for everybody. So open up.
I have a
Okay, I'm gonna
question.
shoot one out. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. I already hogged one, but go ahead.
I have a house that I have listing. The buyers have given a rent back to my sellers for after closing. So we're going to close on the 20th this month with the rent back until 6 days after, actually, I think the 6th of January. If we close earlier okay, let me step back. So the reason they did that is because my sellers are buying their own home that does not close until December 30th, so 10 days later. So if my sellers are able to close the same day, for instance, is there anything that I need to do we have to remove that language about the rent back, or is that just kind of a nice to have in the offer to purchase? Was that a poorly stated question?
Well, did you use an occupancy addendum, the occupancy addendum O?
Did he use one? Hold on, let me just see how he put that in here. Bear with me. I believe he did
That
do
just
that.
has all the good verbiage for occupancy post closing. And
Yeah,
just
so he did do,
did that.
he
Okay,
did do it.
so it's spelled out in there. If they decide they don't need the occupancy at all, it would be an amendment removing that addendum O or removing the occupancy charge or whatever you have written in your contract. So you would need an amendment to say it's
Okay, so
done. And I just want to, because I'm kind of a nerd about it, a reminder, don't call it a rent back. Because it implies a completely different arrangement between the buyer and the seller.
okay,
This occupancy
thank you.
period that's what it is. It's just an occupancy period. And if you use the word rent in there, it implies all the rights and restrictions to a tenant relationship. And this is not one.
Got it. That makes
So,
that's
going
okay.
forward.
That makes sense.
Okay, good.
Thank you for that clarification.
My geekiness. Nada, you had another question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. So with the holidays, it gets squirrely with days out, and I'm writing a contract right now that'll do, if we get it accepted tomorrow, and we do 28 and 30 days for appraisal and finance commitment, it'll be January 3rd and January 5th, which the bank said is fine. Let's just pretend that 28 days for appraisal, it doesn't appraise. But I am beholden to deliver finance commitment 2 days later, but the seller has 5 days, if I keep the default, to get back to me on an appraisal adjustment if I make them do that. Should I be extending that finance commitment the 5 days out to give that time, or whatever time I'm giving them to respond if I have to basically take that route with the appraisal?
I think it's safest to do that, but if you are operating under the appraisal contingency and a notice is sent to the seller, the financing commitment date should still, it shouldn't affect the financing contingency insofar as if you sent off a commitment letter, you guys are still protected under the appraisal contingency because you've served that notice.
Okay,
But that said, I mean, just to make it all clear and buttoned up,
right,
I would, and if you're able to, I would just get it extended.
right, because it's messy then, and it's
It's-
like you're crossing paths constantly.
Right, but they are independent of one another. If you are, you know, again, if you have gotten the appraisal back, you have, it comes in low, and you have served that notice to the seller, then it's in the seller's court at that point to elect to cure. And when a seller cures in this regard, it means that they're coming down to the appraisal value, right? Or
Yep.
they're letting you out of the deal. So that,
Yep.
you know, again, it's independent of the financing contingency. But what we would really don't want to run into is if you don't get that appraisal report back.
Right.
In that 28 days. So that's where it would be really, are you feel like you're in jeopardy of that at all? I mean,
No,
okay,
I really don't, but things happen, the holidays is a wonky time, illnesses, it's a wonky time, so I just would rather, we're not having a closing until January 31st.
okay,
But-
yeah,
But we want to give the sellers the confidence of getting the contingencies buttoned up as quickly as possible within reason. So,
Well, try it in an amendment, see if they go for it. But since you have that time, I would use that question. You never know, the sellers could out of the blue get a secondary offer that's really good. And all they're waiting for is the day that loan commitment is due,
yeah,
and terminate the contract immediately.
yep, that's a great
Mhm.
point.
That's the risk for your buyers.
Okay, then I think I know what to do. Thank you.
Sure.
good questions.
Mhm. I've got a question for anyone who wants to answer. Based on my comments earlier about the CE classes, what did you think of them? What did you think of, especially the required ones at the beginning, the listing one and the offer to purchase one? Do you think they were meaningful? I was saying that I thought they went more in depth than they usually do. But did you learn things from that CE experience?
I felt they were, they had good content. This is my first year doing it, and I just got my license in June. So it was a nice refresher.
Yeah.
You know, they were easy to follow. I didn't find them to be too cryptic, and they did the job pretty well.
Yeah, that's sort of what I thought too. And I admitted, and I'll admit to all of you that as long as I've been doing this, I failed one of the quizzes. I couldn't believe it, but it was on an enforceable contract. But I
What was the
quickly,
question that got you?
it was, I think, when is a commission due in an enforceable
Mhm.
contract? And I was just going through the test very quickly and I just put at closing and it wasn't. And there was another question that was similar to that too, about paying commission. And I answered that quickly and they were both wrong, so I failed it. So I was going, oh my God, I'm still learning. No matter how long I've been doing this, I'm still learning.
Mhm.
Good for you.
Anything about buyer agency? That's not another thing that we'd like to zero in on today. Buyer agencies probably there's some libelous traps in buyer agency. You have to be very careful because of that agreement that you're signing with the buyer has a lot of requirements in it that you are obliged to perform for your buyer as a fiduciary. And it's not to be taken lightly or just assuming you know what a buyer agency entails. Especially when you look at those caution boxes and the boxes, the wording that's in bold print. Make sure that you are very aware of what your obligations are in buyer agency. I think a good refresher for everybody too is reviewing, and Steph covered it a couple of weeks ago, talking about the duties that you owe to all parties and the duties you owe to clients, and making sure that you can distinguish between them and understand them. So, any questions on buyer agency? You all feel comfortable presenting it and practicing it?
I actually have come up with a few interesting now twice with buyers that were horrifically burned by other agents, you know, other companies, wherever. And so, you know, I'm talking to them about buyer agency, and I do a mix of asking for it at the top end of a relationship versus when you write the offer, and it just depends. I know what I should be doing, Joan and stuff. So, but I've had a couple of people when we're talking about the longevity of it, you know, where they're like, well, sure, you can put it for 6 months, or you can put it for 3 months, or whatever the time frame they're comfortable with. But what if? So what if they want to sever that? It's up to them to sever it, correct? And are there repercussions to that buyer? You know, like what happens if the buyer says, "Not, it's not working for me with you, and I don't want to continue with my buyer agency." Then what?
We as a brokerage have never held somebody into a buyer agency agreement that they don't want to be in. So you're absolutely free to expire it. We do want, you know, Joni or I to sign off on the expiration of a buyer agency contract, but, you know, and in my buyer consultations, I let buyers know, you know, if for whatever reason you are unsatisfied with my service, you know, I mean, I would hope that we would try and work it out, but if not, then, you know, I'll be happy to let you out. So.
Yep, and that's typically what I say. So, is there a formal document, like a camera document that you send them?
Buyer agency expiration. So
Okay.
it's the KW form or the
The
WRA.
amendment to the buyer agency.
Is that what yeah, I'm so sorry. That's what yeah.
Just like an amendment to the listing contract, it's identical, and you just change the date that you have that it was going to expire to today's date. But as Steph said, a broker has to sign it as well.
Yep.
Just like a listing.
I think it just makes them feel like they're in control if they felt that they were out of control before. And so I obviously let them know, hey, you don't have to work with anyone you don't want to work with. And if that time came, we would figure it out. But I wanted to know literally what I would do. So thank you.
Well, either party can terminate. I mean, if you're working with somebody who is not cooperating, who's not realistic, you know, it's not just being somebody that you want to work with. You can also
Right.
terminate.
Thank you, guys.
I let a buyer go this year. I didn't want to work with them anymore. It happens. So.
It does happen. Anybody else have any questions? Offer to purchase questions? Financing in the offer to purchase? you know, financing and inspection contingencies are probably the most
Mhm.
complicated.
Well, I can throw another one out.
Do
I
it.
can you tell I'm in the middle of an offer to purchase and I figured I might as well just throw them all out. So moving interest rates right now, it's a huge topic. They're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. Let's just say you're writing your offer and you talk with the bank and they said, okay, today we're at 6.1, stick in there 6.75 just to be safe. But the rate goes to 7. But you know, for whatever crazy reason, it's up. Is that does that give the buyer a reason to get out of the contract, lock, stock and barrel? Yep, that's what I thought. Okay. Because they
And
can't
that's
afford
why-
it anymore.
Right, that's why a good listing agent and a seller should be aware of that when they're reviewing an offer.
Right.
You know, if the rate written in the offer is very close to today's current rate, that may be an issue to counter the buyer. And put a little padding in there because of the speed with their raising the rates.
Yeah. Yeah, the rule of thumb used to be 1/4%, and maybe now it should be half, you know?
Yeah, I would think so. See if we can outrun them.
But yeah, that's definitely, I mean, we saw in, you know, just Charlie demonstrating a couple of weeks ago, the difference in payments between interest rates, you know, I mean, if it gets to the point where, you know, if a buyer is making their decisions based off of a monthly payment and, you know, their payment raises by a significant amount by the time they write an offer and by the time they lock in, I mean, that would be a reason that a buyer would want to exit the deal for sure. So could be, so.
Yeah, as a buyer's agent, there are all kinds of things that you can add into that financing contingency to protect your buyer in that case. One of the things that's not used very often, but when you're putting down the type of loan, you can also put where the loan is to be given from, or whatever preposition I'm needing. By that meaning, you are only looking for financing commitment from a particular institution. And if it's, say that institution says no, and the seller is saying, well, you have an obligation then to go to get another financing from another place, because that's really what's written in the financing contingency. Your buyer won't have to do that if they identify where they're going to get their loan from. So it's something to consider as an extra protection for your buyer, since we're getting back into offers that now are helping to favor the buyer a little bit more than just always pandering to the seller's wishes. But it's something.
Joan, would we write that in the provisions regarding the lender, the specified lender?
You can actually put it in the financing commitment. You can say conventional loan from, you know.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm looking at it now. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Well, if you think of anything in addition, Steph and I are always available to take your calls. So that's where we're here. If there aren't any other questions, we can end this today and give a little, as they call it, gift of time. But I think with all of us highly more heightened awareness from the continuing ed, we're sharpening our skills. So give us a call if you have any particular questions when you're writing an offer. If you haven't written an offer yet, send me, or I'm not going to offer for Steph, but you can send me a test offer at any time. Just pick out a property in MLS and write a good offer and send it to me as if I'm the listing agent. And I'll call you with any comments based on your offer. So if you haven't written one yet and you want some actual practice using zip form and DocuSign, send it to me and we can go over it.
And
All
me as
right,
well.
thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
guys so
Thank-
much.
Thanks, Dada. See you soon.
That's good.
Bye.
Thank you, Steph.